writing for indie games, creating narrative for indie studios. Tonight's panel has been organised and hosted by the Writers Guild of Great Britain, which is a TUC-affiliated union that represents writers working in TV, film, radio, theatre, animation, books and more, including, of course, video games. And we're here to offer advice, contract vetting, events, and we publish our Writers Guild of Great Britain Video Games Guidelines, which you can find by going to a search engine of your choice and typing in Writers Guild of Great Britain Video Game Guidelines. I mean, it's insane. You can find them that easily. And I'm happy to say that following last year's survey, for people that were aware of that, there'll be a new version of the guidelines being published in a few months. And I'm really delighted to be able to say that we're going to be able to bring that new version to you soon. I'm Andrew Walsh, the co-chair of the WGGB's Video Games Committee. I'm also a freelance writer, and I mention that because although the union has a full-time staff, we're also reliant on volunteers, which means that if you join us, you can help to decide what the union does and get involved with organising events like this one. So please do consider joining the Writers Guild. We couldn't have made tonight happen without our sponsors, Arcsy Software, who've also sponsored the other 4 panels that we're having this week, and there's still time to sign up to those. There are still a few tickets left, free tickets left for those, including tomorrow's interactive portfolio event. And Arcsy will be running a separate event on their Twitch channel at 7:30 on Thursday. That's right after Thursday's panel on procedural generation, presumably as long as we haven't changed reality streams during that event. So please note that your cameras are all off. We can't see you on here, which is good. We don't have chat available. We do have Q&A. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please put them in there. And if there's chance, Brendan, our chair, will be able to put those to our panelists for you. And so, right, without further ado, I will hand you over to our chair for tonight's event. Please do enjoy it, and I will see you at the end.
Thank you very much, Andy. My name is Brendan Gibbons, and I will let the wonderful panelists kind of introduce themselves. So I'm a game and narrative designer. I've been working in this industry for about 7 years now. Both doing it as both in-house and freelance, with a lot of it in indie studios. Zalavi, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Zalavi Nelson Jr. I'm a narrative director and studio head who's worked on over 60 games, and all of them within indie. You might know me for my work on Hypnospace Outlaw, Reigns Beyond, Skatebird, and Airport for Aliens, currently run by dogs, or, as I mentioned, dozens of other things. We have a game coming out in like a month. I'm so tired. That
was a very tired 60 games. And Shella, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Shella Ramanan. I'm the co-founder of Threefold Games. We released our narrative exploration game, About a Woman with Dementia, last summer. It is now a BAFTA-nominated game, and it's coming out on Switch and Xbox this week on Thursday. Prior to that, I was a video games journalist for a long time. And then I made the move to indie dev, and we have another title called Windrush Tales, about the Windrush generation in the sort of 1950s and 60s in the UK. I'm a co-founder of Pock and Play, a diversity organization founded to improve the visibility and representation of people of color in the industry and in games. And I am also a narrative designer on the writing team at Ubisoft Massive. So yeah, I straddle both worlds.
Oh, no sudden deadline. And Freya.
Hello, everyone. My name is Freya Campbell. I think compared to everyone else, I'm the panel baby here, which is an interesting spot to fill. I am a freelance game writer and narrative designer, as well as a solo dev, making a lot of like little HTML games in Twine and Bitsy and Ink and a whole range of others. Prior to that, I used to work in VR as well, in kind of VR exhibitions, and also be a recording engineer. And currently I work as a game designer for Supermassive Games, which is not a writing role, just to flag in case you want to ask me that.
Oh, that's fantastic. So yeah, we have a few questions here that we've picked up. It's primarily from Twitter, basically. Like we get them to send in questions, and in general, if you have attendees have any questions, please send it over to the question and answer, and we'll try to pick it up afterwards. But also for the other panels, if you do have any questions for those, please just send them over to Andy, send them over on Twitter, and he'll get your questions to the appropriate chairs and panelists for the other panels. We got our first one, which is kind of a little bit basic, but I think it needs, answering. How do writers work with existing indie companies? And I think kind of like for that, it really is like this, at least like this kind of like two very core sort of things, both sort of in-house and freelancing. I'm actually currently working with an indie company, massive indie team in Germany, both as a game designer and sort of like a narrative designer. But obviously like you can sort of freelance and work either in a kind of more, what's the word?
Freeform?
Yeah, like I was about to say like consultory level, and then like also just like actually working kind of like in engine and kind of directly working in, but also like I think it's kind of with the introduction. There's also just a lot of indie people, or like at some point you just end up making your own company and making your own things with Cello, with Windrush Tales. Freya's have a lot of their works kind of up on HIO, and Zalavir's just about to release An Airport for Aliens, currently run by dogs. I don't know, like, how have you found your experiences working with kind of indie companies outside of, and kind of managing, I guess, like, yeah, both, and how does it compare with like working for, I guess, yourself? Who's interested in answering?
You want to kick it off, Shella, since you're the bridge between two worlds?
Yeah, well, I suppose I don't work for an indie company. The only indie company I worked for was Us2, and that was on pre-production. So I suppose the difference is that you are usually hired to do a very specific thing. Hopefully you have like quite a clear brief, and they have a clear vision of what's going on, whereas when you're working on your own projects, that can change, and there's a lot more iteration and sort of fluidity along the roller coaster ride that is making a game. So yeah, my experience was I was brought on to do a very specific thing for to do a vertical slice on a game they had coming out. So they had a very clear picture of what they wanted, and they just wanted to me to sort of flesh out the narrative for it to fit with this slice of gameplay that they had. So I could bring ideas to the table, and some of those are now in the game. Assemble with Care was the game that I worked on. And yeah, so it was very organized and clear, and yeah, very quick kind of, yeah, and it was a great insight into how a studio works, with more budget and more people and a bigger team, and yeah, it was good.
I'd say that fluidity is a fantastic point to take as far as what to prepare for if your career is in freelance writing for indie games of all things. It can range from everything from, please, for the love of God, tell us what the story is for this game. Also, we come out in 2 months, to informing the world of world building, to doing actual writing, briefs of various sizes and states of clarity or ability to inject your own voice. Essentially, what you're looking at is being the jigsaw piece that fits as many pieces as possible as you encounter different types of clients and scenarios. And I'd say one thing that's especially useful to keep in mind for that divide is understanding the role, also the fluidity that your work might take along the way. it can be thrilling to have to work on a number of things and have them come out at a staggered time. So it seems like you're always making something new, or you always have something to talk about. But it also means that, as opposed to working for yourself, where you can kind of at least try to guarantee that the game will come out, there's several times where what you've done won't see the light of day. Or if the game that does release several years later doesn't include more than maybe a scrap of the original writing that you may have done, preparing yourself for the emotional release of this will exist at some point, probably, hopefully, and moving on to the next gig is a really great preparation for, I guess, the existential pain of living, but also for being an independent games writer.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. Like, so I mean, a game that I worked on very recently a game that I worked on has very recently come out, called Say No More, and it's been a year since I wrote it. And it's kind of wild to sort of look back and like, I have forgotten everything that I did here. Like I wrote nearly all of it.
Yeah.
yeah. It's sort of just like, oh yeah, I'm actually funny, huh? Or like, whatever. It's like, oh wow. But it's very funny to sort of to have that, to really kind of like it is just unfortunately part of the work where it's like you can either come in as, I think, like kind of what Cello was doing, kind of like at a consultory role, like I've done that with a few clients where you're sort of they're like, we need some we need some direction, we're looking for like help to like figure out where we're going with this, to sometimes just like I was also very recently asked to just like, hey, we're coming out in 2 months, we need someone to just implement these words, we need someone to write, please help us. And it kind of like I think the point about being the jigsaw, or at least like how you have every, like it's almost like all of these indie companies have completely different needs, and it's up to you to be able to kind of recognize what they're looking for within the development process, what they need, and then either specialize or generalize to kind of be able to fit, and then kind of help them out and get that money and be able to live and do all of these things.
It can be quite the difference between coming in as like, here is a little box that we want your writing to exist within, and you don't have to worry about outside of that, versus like, please write us a whole game, please write us a whole world, please write us a whole like system of things. That can be quite a big, like that was the biggest difference for me, kind of moving from like, I just make games on my own and I'd never talk to anyone else, versus like, actually now I'm writing for a for a little team, for a little company or something. And like, it's quite a big gear change, I think, if you're not used to that.
What have you found has been most useful in making that gear change, taking that step?
Honestly, the fact that you don't actually have to write 100% of everything, and you can just like ask someone else. Like, I don't know, like it's a really dumb bit of advice, but like, I keep hearing that not everyone asks questions about what they're doing. And so actually just being like, I have a list of like 30 questions I want to ask you about what I'm doing here. Please answer these. That's been the most useful like trick or tip or method.
Yeah, I think with at least with a lot of indie companies, like, or like we're all just trying to make something, and we're all just trying to make something good. And being open, clear, communicative about what your need or what your questions are and what these things is really kind of like, and is kind of a valuable way of working, I guess, because it's about collaboration, right? So you definitely should just be like, if you have any questions and all of these things, you just ask them, and the hope is they'll also come at you with the same honesty and frankness that like you need for also the project, for you to finish the project, for you to work the project. The second question we have is, do writers need to become technical specialists to deliver indie narratives? Which kind of is interesting. I think obviously, definitely, it's like, you don't have to be mad to work here, but it helps, because obviously knowing what knowing what an engine or something is kind of capable of doing, kind of, or someone else is capable of implementing, helps you a lot in like being able to figure out kind of like a moment-to-moment thing. Maybe you want to like, I want this cool explosion, but if you have no idea if that's even possible or not, then you kind of tend to sort of curb yourself a little bit more. And obviously, like being able to just prototype something yourself is very valuable. Like even if it's just in Twine or something that's very, very simple. Yeah, like I mean, I know Freya, yeah, since you make a lot of games yourself, how much use of yeah, how much do you take all of your sort of technical skill into kind of your more sort of narrative design work?
I mean, it depends, like, because when you say like writing for an indie company, indie games companies can be like 3 people, or they can be like 30 or like hundreds potentially. So the smaller the team, I think the more useful it is to have like at least, if not like a like specialism in the technical side, at least like a knowledge of like, I know roughly how this works, I know roughly what's possible and what's not possible, because like I often end up moonlighting as sort of QA or like trying to influence design bits as well. And so it kind of goes both ways. And like you say, being able to prototype stuff in any kind of like game tool, like Twine or something, where you can do like a kind of almost like a flowchart version of your narrative helps. But kind of as the team gets bigger and you're less likely to be working on stuff that isn't the writing side, I think it's kind of like situational on the company. Because I know I see like whenever I'm looking at, you know, freelance writing jobs or something, sometimes they do specifically list you have to be able to use Unity or something for this writer role, or for this narrative designer role, or for this role that we've called writer and should be narrative designer, or vice versa. So like, you know, it helps, but it's not 100% necessary depending what you're going for. But like, it helps me definitely. But also like, I don't know Unity very well at all, so I'm scared of that. I don't go for those ones.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I think it will always be useful, but I think if you're someone who's interested in writing for games, I wouldn't say it's a prerequisite. I think the important thing is to understand the pressures and challenges of the other roles and how you can impact that either positively or negatively. And that doesn't mean you have to have, you know, a lot of technical knowledge to do it yourself. You just need to understand what their challenges are and, you know, how you intersect with all the different roles within the team. I think that's key, and that comes to sort of, it helps you communicate with them. Just understanding their language is really key, because you're talking to people all the time when you're making a game. So yeah, it's just being able to translate your language into their language and vice versa is really useful.
Yeah, right. It's a lot about kind of being able to communicate, you know, what needs to happen, and I think like it's just sometimes I think I guess in general, obviously if you don't know what's possible and what's not possible, sometimes you might be like, oh, this should be easy for someone else to make, right? And then like you come and ask them and they're like, this is gonna take months. What are you talking about? It's like, we can't do this. I'm like, oh no, it needs that change. And yeah, like that's kind of the being able to just at least understand the work that that a programmer or an artist or like all of these things, how your work implements.
Or if you don't understand, know that you don't understand and say, okay, so I'm thinking this is this possible, is this pie in the sky? And you know, quite often if it's within scope and within budget, they'll be like, that sounds really cool, and they'll try and figure it out, because that's what they like to do, is solve problems and make awesome stuff. So that's what I found.
As Freya mentioned, the more knowledge you have, the more you can feel free to ask questions. Because if you preemptively limit your narrative based off of knowing that it's a hellscape to try to have someone put something in a pocket or shake a hand or interact with someone in any regard.
We need the scene where he eats the noodles and you're like, oh
my god.
We need this like really nuanced scene where he puts a jacket on or something. Like,
that there's bits like that can definitely help, but then there's also teams that are specifically looking to solve that problem. Like they want to be the ones to have the jacket putting on scene, because their animators can be sacrificed to the Dark Elder God. So being able to ask those questions about what their priorities are, what they don't want to even build as a team, what they aren't interested in, so that you can kind of, when you turn in your draft, have almost like the perfect story just for them, and it gets approved first try because they wanted a scene that had a flashback with a dinosaur in it, and you knew because you asked. That's the good stuff, and it allows you to move. It allows the team to move on with whatever they want to build next. It allows you to move on to the next project, and as Brendan very helpfully mentioned, get that money, because you need money to live and eat.
Talking about money, actually, the next question is, how can writers navigate the potential challenges of finances? Which I guess is entirely, like, I mean, the part of it is like, entirely depending on where you live and so on and so forth with taxes and these kind of things. But I think like the main thing is like, just don't assume whatever you're making is going to be a hit, or like, even if you're getting, like if you're working something for yourself, or like, because most of the time, working with existing indie companies, you get a, what's the word? You just get sort of payment. There's, like you have the contract, and I guess, since we're from the Writers Guild of Great Britain here, we do have a rate, like we do have a PDF that that has some of the rates of what people should be earning. So you maybe want to look there as well if you're someone who's like wondering, I don't know what I should get paid. But yeah, and like obviously there's also I think in general kind of for resources, please look for kind of, for, I mean, if anyone's doing freelance, it's just generally how much money do I need to live divided by how many days am I working, and then that's kind of the amount of money that you should get, or that you should seek to get, and then you like, I don't know, add another 30% because sometimes you need things. That's kind of the like a very vague thing, but I guess like, or kind of more sort of something that way. But like, is there kind of what have you found kind of I mean, finances is always a challenge. How do you do it? Or like how, what do you find is helpful? I think a part of it is also just like very quickly, like appreciating the privileges that you have. Because I mean, a lot of it is like I'm living with my partner who's able to, like, or at least when I was freelancing, I was living with my partner who was able to take care of rent for me. And that was a big help. And that sometimes is just like the way it is. Like, because there are things and that you're able to sort of like take, what's the word? Take advantage of, and I think it's always, and you should be clear about that, right? Like, it's sometimes working in this industry can be very difficult financially, and you should sort of take account of like what you have available to you, so that you don't just give terrible advice to people who have less than you.
I think, yeah, sorry. I think also because I was a freelance writer, before I was an indie dev for a really long time in different sectors as well as games. And I found the best thing was to talk to other freelancers about their rates, because the way that, rates are controlled is, and people are undercut is because they don't know what the other people are getting. And, people will undervalue themselves quite often, especially if they're just entering the space. So share your rates. I used to do that with journalist friends and stuff all the time. It's like, what do you get from this particular person? And that kind of empowers you to know what the market rate is. And and I think people are willing to share that because they know that's a way of creating a fairer landscape for everybody.
I think, like, for me, at least for the first couple of years, the major trick to how to manage finances as a freelance games writer is a day job, which sounds like a kind of bitter joke, but is the reality for me. And so, like, whilst doing games writing stuff, I've had day jobs where, like, I mentioned earlier, I used to work in VR exhibition, that sort of scene, or as a solo dev, it also means I do some just game design without writing on the side. Or I've had kind of entirely different industry jobs, like I'm going to go home from my job as a delivery driver and then work on games writing, because this is how I'm balancing my two careers at once. And so I think sometimes like it's not as obvious that, people don't just kind of start in the industry and it's like, bam, now you work full time as a games writer. There's this kind of gradual crossfade almost between what you did before and actually working full time as it.
Yeah.
And I think it helps give a little nuance to your writing as well. If you have this kind of totally different background sort of job where you can like sneak in little details to make it feel a little bit more realistic, I think.
It also makes it feel less isolating, especially early career, to know that most people in your medium who have like written your favorite freelance indie games, written your favorite indie games, or made your favorite indie games, did it while having a day job or while having some source of stability, including the privilege of a partner or parents or an inheritance or some sort of windfall that allowed them to pursue their chosen career. The major thing to keep into account, or that I at least try to keep into account while I'm talking to especially earlier career writers for indie studios, is the degree to which this is normal, and in fact not risking everything for your creative dreams should be seen as healthy, because you also have people to take care of in your life that aren't you, most likely. Again, parents, partners, etc. To that degree, the one point that I would have that hasn't been already excellently covered by the rest of my panelists is, when you are setting rates and your times for working, keep in mind how much of your time will be consumed by things that are not actually doing the work. Billing, chasing down billing, doing your account, finding the next job, dealing with accounting or legal services. You take on a lot of, especially working in indie studios, a lot of administrative burdens yourself that would be perhaps addressed by a larger company. You don't just receive a payment usually and then go on with the rest of your day. So take into account that if you're working a normal amount of time during a week, you're going to have at least one of those work days consumed by all the things that are putting yourself in a position to work, to write.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty good. Thank you very much for mentioning that. We should go to the next question. And it's, why are indie narratives often so different in tone and structure to AAA games when the latter is also financially successful and perhaps a safer bet? Which I think is like, I mean, the question is a little bit, I don't know, like, why do people rent houses when buying one is a safer bet? I think like there's obviously making kind of making bigger games instead of making smaller games instead of bigger ones is a lot of it is kind of due to the lack of capital or work hours to kind of copy these AAA structures, and kind of like there's also, you just end up being kind of more risk averse when there's more money involved. So it's obviously I mean, like, if you're working in a smaller group, if something doesn't work, and hopefully everyone it's only, you're not necessarily betting everything on this succeeding, like a few people's lives are going to be involved. Well, rather like, in kind of a more AAA sort of structure, then obviously you have to think about 350 people's livelihoods and their family, and like how, like kind of how, like your decision to maybe, kind of make something the way it is kind of affects that way. But like, I guess what kind of some people here have had kind of general experiences with kind of with bigger companies, and I'd be interested to hear, like, what do you think, like, why are the narratives just different to AAA ones?
Take it away.
Well, I suppose there is the thing of, like you said, the the budgets are completely different, and you know, the bigger the budget, the more risk adverse you are. So there is there's a certain amount of freedom with having the small budget or no budget, which is what Before I Forget had for a really long time. Yeah, there is a freedom with that. Of course, it constrains you creatively in a lot of ways, but that can be a really great space to create in. You know, those constraints make you think really creatively, and can be really inspiring in some ways. And I suppose you are, I mean, from my experience, I was in that space because I wanted to tell the stories that aren't being told in the AAA space. And I think that's what attracts lots of people, you know, to the indie scene, and is to just like, you can make weird stuff, or you can make incredibly personal, sort of intimate things, or you can make things that are a bit like something you really loved from years ago that games don't make anymore. They don't make games like that, so I'm going to do something like this. So yeah, I think that's why, and it's just the sort of lifeblood of the industry. You know, it's the sort of fertile soil on which the industry, you know, right up to AAA grows. And, you know, without those sort of like weird little risk takers, you know, there's lots of things that we see in AAA that wouldn't be there if not for that.
Yeah, roguelikes in AAA have become prolific and roguelike-based structures because of people with no budgets doing it first.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's this sort of theme. I can't remember the specific terminology, or frustratingly, the people who I have seen talk about it, but there is this sort of theme of like indie game devs doing sort of like unpaid research for AAAs on a kind of cultural level, where it's like you say, you know, kind of roguelike devs have been doing this kind of like, we're going to make a roguelike. People who play roguelikes, like traditional ones, are like, this sucks, this is way too hard. So you get a really narrow pool of people who like them. And then as that kind of grows, and, you know, kind of AAA companies turn very slowly like a big truck on a highway, they kind of slowly steer into this like almost like unpaid research done by the smaller ones. Go, oh, roguelikes, maybe we should do something like this. Mm-hmm. And there was a great thread on Twitter last week, which is really good timing, on an analogy for this. Although I have to say, I've not written for a AAA game, so this is kind of speculative and from talking to people, not personally. But like, if you have 30 people who are all going to a ice cream shop, and you say you can all have a free ice cream if you agree on one flavor between all of you, they're all going to probably agree on like chocolate or vanilla or something, like a safe, popular flavor that might not be their favorite. And so from the reverse of that, that's like, if you are setting out specifically to make lots of money back, having invested lots of money on a game that is popular with more people rather than like someone's favorite, you're going to go with the more kind of generally appealing ones.
Yeah, I guess there's that. Sorry, no, it's just like that bit about like, what's the word? It's like almost in the nature, because there's only a few people working on it. They kind of get there's sort of this natural allowance for them to put themselves in it a bit more, and therefore you get kind of slightly weirder games just because on a day-to-day schedule you have fewer people, or it's only one person consistently making the choices, or all of those things.
And I think one important thing to recognize is that it's still possible to do more personal and more personal, weirder, whatever is the term you want to use for it, or the subgenre of what you're looking to do. You can do that writing within a bigger studio space, because people ultimately make games. People like Shella work on titles with Ubisoft, and the game is improved by having those people there. one thing that's important to note is just in what way you also need your work to be recognized. Because one major thing that I've recognized from AAA titles and from people who've worked on bigger studio games, and from even my experience working on bigger studio games, is that you may do something really, really neat, but it probably won't be accepted or recognized to the same degree that this really bold, daring indie experiment is. So the inverse of the everyone choosing chocolate or vanilla problem is, well, what if you have like one dash of pistachio in that chocolate or vanilla thing? Most people are just going to call it chocolate or vanilla, and you're just gonna be like, no, but this is pistachio. That was me. I gave that to you. It's like, no, that was chocolate. Definitely tasted chocolate.
2% pistachio, 98% chocolate, sort of thing.
So keep in mind, whether for your ego or for your own personal enjoyments or ability to continue in an industry, do you need the boldness of your ideas to be recognized specifically within the form they take? And if that is the case, indie very well might be a better creative environment for you long term.
Cool. So the next question that we have is, I think it's a very fun way to put it. How often do you get into a fight because you need a boat chase sequence, and the lead dev comes to you with a shiv made out of his rubber ducky? Like, how much risk and creative freedom can you take, like in an indie company, in regards to the available skill pool? And I think, I guess, like to me, it's like it's always a little bit of a fight, but it is just like, you know, when you grab an idea from the ether and sort of like drag it down into this mortal coil. Like, it's, you know, like how it appears is always very different depending on, you know, like kind of the circumstances at the time, you know, like, does it, like, okay, we can have a boat chase sequence, but does it need to be playable? Does it need to be like, what perspective does it have? Like, I think, yeah, there's like lots of, you know, there's more than one way to skin a cat, and like it kind of depends on there's multiple solutions for every single problem. But like, yeah, like, have you ever had kind of this friction between kind of yourself as kind of a creative and then wanting something, and then kind of yeah, either, you know, because of sort of implementation reasons, or because of sort of various other things, it's like, this is not, unfortunately, like, yeah, this is not the way that, you know, like you kind of have to make what's the word,
compromise.
Yeah.
I try to be proactive about concessions these days. Be like, give me that rubber ducky. Tell me where I can cut the scope. I adore the problem-solving part of video games, and so much of being a games writer, even when you put aside how our work has to evolve and iterate. Stephen King didn't need to account for suddenly there being playable vehicles midway through development and have to change all of the writing to do that. Games writers do. Every games writer is better than Stephen King. I love Stephen King, but every games writer is. That's just math. So when you look at the problem-solving space you have as particularly working in indie, one really powerful thing is not just being proactive about concessions, but looking at the very particular team composition that you're working with. So if it has a heavy music influence, one of the few full-timers is someone who's a musician or a sound designer, or maybe that's even the creative director of the game, naturally you can get much stronger results from the ether you have, in a very metal way that Brendan described, pulled down into our mortal coil, expressing that through music more, or through songwriting, anything that uses the particular balance of the team that you're collaborating with will naturally emerge that much stronger.
Yeah, I think I've had more of those, not fights, but you know, those those things, those battles that you're fighting for something. I've had that more on the AAA side than in the indie side, and I think it comes down to whose purse is it and who's holding the purse. Because you know, when you know, in Threefold, it's my purse. So, you know, mine and Claire's, we've got the, you know, we know what money we do or don't have. So it's not easy to make those cuts, but we know, you know, we know why we're making those cuts or whatever. We know why that scope is being scaled down or whatever. And, you know, when it's someone else's purse, you know, it's much easier to be like, but we need the, you know, like, we need the 20 bats, like flying with, you know, whatever, you know, fighting people in air balloons. We need it. You know, so it kind of comes down to that, and you learn to pick those battles and which ones that are reasonable for you to fight for. When it's someone else's money, you know, you can only go to a certain point, and, you know, like Oliver says, then you use your narrative design hat and you look at the tools that the certain game that you're making, the project, has at your disposal, and it's like, well, we can't do this, but we could get the same kind of sort of epic moment or whatever it is, using, yeah, like the music and the audio. Maybe we can have some cool audio effect here, and that will give the, yeah, and so all those things. But I think, yeah, it definitely makes a difference when it's someone else's money compared to your own.
I think even when it's like, even when it is your own money, because I'm previously used to just doing the whole thing on my own. I'm kind of used to having to fight with myself, where it's like, okay, on the one hand, yes, I might want this really cool bit of writing. On the other hand, it's going to be a nightmare to implement. So like, I'm kind of like preemptively compromising. And I think that's been a good mindset to bring into jobs where I'm working for someone else. So it's like, I'm used to having to tell myself no, almost, like when it comes to something, which, you know, maybe there's too much of that to be able to do, but it's a good skill to have anyway.
Yeah,
You know, just kind of, actually, this is a cool idea, but it doesn't work. It's gone. The end.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good tool to have, and it definitely has helped me just let things go, be like, okay, it's fine.
Yeah.
Speaking of saying no more, no isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can be an opportunity to find a different solution or a way to get across the same feeling, sensation, vibe, but in a different form.
Yeah,
definitely.
It's definitely about the collaboration, right? Because like I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's definitely like the first thing that that kind of comes to the top of my head is like in, oh my god, I just can't remember words. But in some games, like, you know, sometimes or like, okay, no, yes, let's look at Yakuza, for example. Like, it has so many different ways of it telling the story, whether it's like actual, like active, like full motion, like really impressive cutscenes, or like cutscenes that are like, yeah, that are voice and so on and so forth, or like cutscenes but where it has the text, so instead of voice, or like you know, it has kind of like this gradient of like how something is told, so that, like, you know, you can then work on something that is going to be impressive and like focus on that, and then like but you can be flexible with those smaller points and those sort of things. Like, it's, yeah, like it's sort of this, there's always more than one solution for anything, and it's about the how you as a writer and how kind of like, yeah, sort of collaborate with the team, and hopefully also help them give the solutions that they can best give. Like, yeah, because it's just the point where, like, you know, if you're working with someone who's very music heavy, or like who's able to do these sort of things, then, you know, take that advantage and be able to make something that's really good together. The next question is, what's to stop indie narratives from being too far out there? There's so much risk that you can take, avenues to explore, but how, if at all, do you make sure that you don't go too far and push your audience away? I think that you're like, there is kind of always an audience for your work. Like, I mean, you know, like because, you know, whether in small or big, like, yes, we've just released a game where it's literally a one-button game, and all you can do is say no to things. As Oliver is going to release, you know, an airport for aliens currently run by dogs, or even the Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator. I think you're very like it's kind of like, what is there anything that's too far out there? What's your kind of
Yeah, I'd actually say that that's a really big and important piece of my creative process. There are games I'm not going to make, not just out of reasons of taste or of budget or anything else, but just because I am making my own calibration in terms of even how much I want to bring something into being. Of, okay, this is going to cost how many years of my life and how much money. Do I really care that much about telling the story of a potato from its birth to its propagation? Not really. As you've mentioned, you nearly always have an audience, someone who can be interested in your work, some sort of audience. It's a matter of finding it and reaching that person, which is by no means an easy feat. But yeah, I actively fold into my creative process. For example, something like Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator or an airport for aliens currently run by dogs, these things that seem very far out, particularly when I approach platforms, I at least have to have the language to be able to express to them how this is not as strange as it appears, as how it has more mainstream appeal, how it has these specific bits of accounting for what we would call mainstream tastes, which actually isn't boring. Mainstream tastes can get really wild. People were super into Bridgerton and Stranger Things, which when you start to think of unpack what those things mean, those are actually very strange intellectual properties. It's just a matter of, a lot of ways, it's packaging, thinking about how you then communicate those strange ideas and putting that in I guess, using your internal instincts to fold them, into a way that would make other people, that you're reasonably sure will make the other people want to experience them. Shella, before I forget, is a game which could definitely be something that turns people off, makes them sad, preemptively. So how did you think about packaging that game for, for an audience of players?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there's, if you are making anything that's a niche or marginalized perspective, it's just as much a risk as, it being wacky or wild or whatever. And yeah, we went through, so this was just a story we wanted to tell. And then it was when we went for funding, sort of approached investors and things like that. They loved it, and we had lots of interest, but people wanted it to be longer or thought it should be a documentary because, it's about dementia, or they thought it was for old people because it had a person over the age of 25 in it. It was just, or it was for the care sector because, it was about a topic in, a health issue that affects more people in the world than, anyone would like to. So let's marginalize it over into it's for the care sector and it's an educational game. So then we did sort of interrogate, what is this game? We knew that we didn't want it to be an educational game. We knew we wanted it to be a piece of art for its own sake, because nobody would level that at a book or a film about, a topic that touches on real lives. And we just decided to just make the game we wanted to make. We tried to change it to get more money. And then I just kind of stopped, and I was just like, this isn't what we want to make. We're kind of losing the heart of this experience. So we scaled it back down and just like went back on the path that we had. And I think it's, yeah, just believing in what you have and trusting the people who do give you really, who respond to it immediately. And we did have that, you know, this real immediate response to it right from the game jam onwards. And it's trusting that, basically. And sometimes it will work out and sometimes it won't. And that's the creative process. That's what happens.
I know it's really tough because it is like I guess it's about like I guess a lot of things is like especially when you're making something that is for your that is a lot of yourself. It's like managing kind of, you have to sort of manage other people's expectations of what this experience will be. And kind of make sure that they understand, like, yeah, this is the limitations of what we're working with, or this is what I'm interested in focusing on, and this is what I, you know, want to say. But it seems like, I think overall, like people, it does seem like in general, a lot of people are kind of receptive to that honesty, or receptive to kind of being told, like, here is some silence. So I could hear an ice cream truck.
There's an ice cream truck outside my house, which is wonderful timing.
Sorry,
I'm just going to temporarily mute myself until you ask me a question.
That's fine. I was just being distracted because I want ice cream, obviously. And I guess like the point is like making sure that I guess like with writing, both in games and outside of games, it's a lot about communication. And in games, it just happens to be where it's like you're not just communicating this in kind of the sense of like the words in the book, but also like, you know, the words that are in the blurb, and like, and how you communicate this to before it's sold, and then it's also like how you communicate this to the people that you're working with, and all of these sort of things. And it's just like layering that communication and solving those sort of problems in the different way to hopefully create something that is that you're happy with, or, you know, like hopefully authentically you. But it sort of depends on the project, right? Whether there's room for that or not. And the final question that we have before we go into the more general question and answers is there more freedom as an indie writer, period, or do you feel some sort of pressure to be more niche, original, etc., with your story than a typical AAA game? For example, if you wanted to make a racing game, would you feel a need to have a character storyline that's really out there instead of a simple, albeit well-written, bottom-to-top story? And is this kind of, and are these feelings because it's sort of more self-imposed, or if it's because like of expectation within the indie community? And I guess that's, for me, I think that's kind of like where you have really different answers as a writer. Like it's sort of up to your predilection and taste, like how you approach a project, and kind of, and often, you know, and you're selling your own voice and how you would do something. You know, if all four of us were like given the task, go make a racing game, I think, you know, what we would focus on, and kind of how we would tell that story would be like really, really different. And then it's kind of like for the indie company itself, it's more like them picking the writers that fit them the most, or like that has the taste, you know, like that is sort of similar to what their creative director or whoever is looking for. Because like, no, maybe you hire someone specifically because you want their safety or you want their wildness. And yeah, because sometimes you just kind of like, you get hired to do the thing, or you get hired because of your strengths. But yeah, is there like, I don't know, like is, do you feel like the need to kind of, I guess, yeah, like respond to the market, I guess, like, or like how much of that is kind of something that you kind of actively think about when you're kind of, I guess, like when you gauge your feeling about a story and or something that you're making, how much of it is like you're kind of looking towards other projects in a very sort of like, oh, you know, I think it should be, what's the word? That it should be weirder, or it should be, you know, more different, because you know, there are other kind of projects out there, even though that there is kind of like this story that you are supposed to tell, I suppose, or like depending on the project.
I think that there's something to be said for other indies encouraging you to be weirder, be bolder. When you do explore that weirder space, you would be surprised how often you're actually giving other developers the permission to do the same. So for several of the projects I've worked on, one big thing I care about is having older protagonists in the work. And when I say, hey, what if our protagonist wasn't 25? Things like Before I Forget give me something I can be like, it's BAFTA nominated. People love this. It gives me ammunition to pitch an idea that is sometimes both either more safe to tell the dev team, please, let's not tell this storyline about cops right now, or something a little bit more out there or seen as out there, such as having an older protagonist or a marginalized protagonist or something else. Keeping in mind that especially if your work hits critical mass or has a potential of hitting a larger mass, that you are affecting the landscape for other independent developers, I think is something that even, I'll be honest, I myself don't consider enough. And it's something that for an industry that is so laser focused on, in many ways, either extrapolating or shrinking down something that someone else has done, that effect can be direct and powerful.
I think there's also like, when you're operating on a smaller indie game scale, especially like the further down you get towards the sort of like real low budget or no budget things, like your game's selling point isn't going to be, look at this like billion-mile open world with a billion quests you can do. That's just not in your area. And because you're potentially losing a lot of the like kind of technical selling points, I think there is a bit, I don't know if I want to say pressure, but like there is a kind of like natural pivot towards like, okay, if we can't do something really amazing technically on like a sort of like massive level, what can we do narratively, or what can we do like, you know, even kind of in other small design things that will give us some kind of edge or some kind of sell. And also I think like the more sort of niche your theme is, you know, like I make a lot of games about LGBT characters and they have quite passionate audiences, and so sometimes kind of focusing in a niche gives you a better response. Like horror games is a really passionate community and a really passionate niche, and because people focus in there, it's like, you know, there's a kind of like a back and forth between the audience and what you're writing. The ice cream truck has arrived, so I'm going to cut myself short a little bit there and pass on to someone else if they have a comment.
Yeah, I don't think I feel a pressure. I like I said before, I do agree with both the comments. You know, there's that, you know, again, it's that creativity through constraint is a really interesting space. And yeah, and also that thing of, yeah, helping other developers by sort of like breaking new ground by doing whatever it is that you're doing that isn't being done. That's the beauty of the indie space, is that you can do you can just be like, oh, why isn't there a game like this? And then you just think, you know what, I'm just going to do it myself. And that's pretty much, you know, like my creative process is I just get inspired by something, I don't know, a documentary or something, or somebody that I read an article about or something, and then it just starts the cogs turning. And if it's interesting to me, hopefully it'll be interesting to someone else. You know, and then I have an amazing creative relationship with Claire, and, you know, I went to her with an idea I thought of it on, you know, I think it was around the time that we released Before I Forget, and I had this cool idea, and I was like, Claire will literally murder me if I come with a new game idea on launch week. So I sat on it for a bit and said something to a friend, and then a few months later, quite a long time later, I was like, so I have this game idea. And she's like, oh my God, I've been thinking about something along those lines, in that same kind of sphere. And yeah, we just have this weird kind of connection, yeah, where we're always on the same wavelength. And you can do that in indie. You can just be like, we have this cool idea, and yeah, there's a freedom there, and I don't feel a pressure. I feel liberated to explore the things that I think should be in the game space.
That was really wonderful. I think, yeah, like I think it's nice to kind of or I guess it's wonderful to kind of hear that, and hopefully like, yeah, other people can sort of like get that feeling as well. Because I mean, yeah, it's just, I think sometimes maybe there's like kind of a more of a financial pressure in these sort of things, and allowing yourself to sort of make something almost for the sake of it, almost for the sake of making it. Because I think, I don't know, sometimes we kind of look at this industry as something that's very something that's very money focused, or something, you know, like that, you know, like that, it's kind of this thing. But it's, to me, the games industry is a little bit like making games. I think we should more and more see it as like making music, whereas like it's something where you can do like a little bit, like, you know, there's nothing stopping me from like releasing an album of me singing by just songs, right? Like, you know, even if it's like if it's like covers, or like, well, a cappella covers or whatever, like something very, very basic and simple. And like this, and there's nothing stopping me from just like, I don't know, making Pac-Man clones. Like it's like the same. And then like how it kind of goes forward and like becomes an expression of like what I'm actually interested in, the stories or like the things. It's like, yeah, like I think we have a lot of room for, and as like, you know, game development gets more democratized because we have all of these engines that are easier to use. And like we have things like Roblox for the kids who are, you know, like been learning how to make all of these stuff. Like, yeah, like hopefully we'll just get a lot more people who are interested in kind of like making things and using game development as a source for just as an outlet for their creativity and a source for joy. But I mean, yeah. Talking about, so we're now going to go to some of the questions that some of the people have posted, since we have like about half an hour left. There's one here that's I think very nice, because it's very, like, we've talked a lot about relatively like holistic things, or like kind of like big wide ideas. Here's something simple. What's the best way to organize and communicate or display, documentation wise, a story with complex plot and multiple overlapping paths, player paths and choices? What tools are we all using basically to help with our game development? I think to me right now, obviously, like I use a flowchart tool called YEd, and sometimes I just use Twine, because that just allows you to kind of like flowchart a game very easily. And I also use like Notion as a wiki if a game gets complex, or Miro is a really nice way to sort of like just draw things out. What are you all using?
My dark secret is that probably a good sort of 70% of my games are a chaotic pile of notepad documents. I don't know, it works for me. But like, you know, people say like they use spreadsheets, or yeah, they use Twine, or I've drawn things before with pen and paper. But yeah, honestly, I love my plain TXT documents. It's great. It doesn't make me sleep badly at night thinking about how messy they are.
It's okay. I have like I have like Notepad++, and like I have like 22 tabs or something open of just like various things.
Actually, yeah, like a code editor where you can have like a hierarchical view and like open folders and stuff. That's really good. Like I use Sublime or something for that.
Yeah, I use a lot of stuff on paper. I write all my scripts longhand with a fountain pen.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I like to, because even when you're kind of stuck, you can still make a mark on the page. You can always, yeah, make a mark. And so I find and it's much more like direct, like brain to hand kind of than this screen. I feel this real kind of detachment. And then also when I type it up, it gets filtered. So it gets another pass as it's going from the notebook into whatever document I'm using. And then, yeah, quite a few of the problems we had, and before I forget, when we had something that was stuck, that was really broken, paper, like pen and paper, just like getting big paper and big pens to kind of, yeah, I suppose mind map it, and or even, you know, like drawing post-it notes, because I never seem to own post-it notes, which seems to be a mistake in game dev, because I think game dev's built on post-it notes. But so I just draw boxes or circles and link them, and yeah, I find paper development really useful. But otherwise, ink is something I've written in. I've only written in Excel for other people. It's not my first choice. And then, yeah, I've used Miro recently. Claire introduced me to that.
When you copy your fountain pen in, what do you do with all your like little margin doodles and stuff? Do they end up in the game too?
No, I just type it up. So they're all in, I also keep all my notebooks. So yeah, there will be this archive of weirdness, yeah, in these notepads. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, they just live on shelves and they get put away with each game on them.
That's awesome. I think that, yeah, there's something really powerful about embracing not just what works for you, but whatever is, if you're in indie and you don't have to turn it into a Jira task, using that freedom appropriately. One thing I've enjoyed is like, I'll sometimes act out conversations between multiple characters, like in their entirety, with a recorder going on my phone, and then I'll transcribe it. I have, yeah, done like physical blocking out. I've done pictures, videos, text documents. Word docs are my secret shame of like, I just like Word docs. They just make sense to me.
Yeah.
Spreadsheets, whatever fits the project and the specific purpose, knowing that you have basically this unlimited tool chest, and it's just a matter of what fits best for whatever you're trying to do. Not only to get better at using all those different things, it's also just more fun. It's so fun to look back at like, oh, here's the 30 really silly pictures of my camera roll when I was trying to communicate this very specific behavior tree to a designer for like narrative purposes. And that's having the ability to construct the delightful archive of our career to look back at in hindsight is such a incredible freedom, a necessary one.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Like, I mean, I think I don't know why, but I end up using spreadsheets just a bit too much, which I mean, I think is just kind of by the nature of things. And I do end up like printing them out. So I have this like wonderful 59 pages of spreadsheets so that I can at least like, you know, so after writing down the like 1,000 lines or whatever, I can at least like, you know, like for once, just not look at a screen. So that's kind of, yeah, like I think I totally agree. Like getting it to different formats, it just kind of also helps a lot, I think, in how you think about it. You know, and yeah. Next question. I mean, I think this is like nice. It's a relatively short one, but I think it's very nice to quickly answer. A lot of you have multiple shipped games out there, but do you still see a lot of rejections when applying for your next gig? I mean, my answer is yes. I think it should be just very quickly like, yeah. I think in general, everyone's like, you know, you kind of see people who are like, who you feel like have made it. But it like, I mean, number one, for every project, it's like you you know, it's maybe not necessarily just like the project for you, right? Or like there's someone else who fits it better. But yeah, like how are people finding work? Although I mean, I guess most of us are now a bunch of us are now doing in-house work now.
I mean, there's some projects that self-reject from, like you say, you're just not the fit, even if it comes up and it's like, game writer, it's like, it's not the one for me. But like, I probably have a good 15 to 20 to 1 ratio of like, didn't get it to get it, which is normal. And like, I think it's one of those things that's not really public. Like, you know, no one, you don't kind of promote your failed project applications or whatever. So it's like the sort of dark secret of probably not just games writing, like a lot of game jobs, there are a lot of rejections out there.
Yeah.
The important.
No, go on, you first.
I was going to say the important thing to remember is that everyone dies. So for every project you sign on to, there's also 2, 3, 4, 5, an infinite number of others that you can't. So you're not just looking at self-rejections or rejections from companies, you're also looking at a limited human bandwidth or a work schedule that you limit so that you yourself do not encourage the speed of your oncoming mortality. So embracing that, accepting that, that's been a big part of like my process. Like people talk about how many things I work on, and it is a absurd amount, but I find that funny just because of how many jobs I don't take, or opportunities that or opportunities or things I want to pursue that I push down the road. We're all making those choices, and as soon as you cross over the event horizon as a freelancer from dear God, I will take any job, to I could have 2 jobs, 3 jobs. Embracing the limiting factor and also thinking actively of how much time a gig is going to take is really important. It is important as a part of your process to ask a client how long the engagement is, because sometimes you want something short, sometimes you want something long, and it's all a matter of your particular perspective and situation at a given time.
Yeah, and also recognizing when you've like reached the event horizon takes a while sometimes. You're just like slogging away. You're like, hold on a second. I don't need to work this furiously anymore. And that's a good moment. But yeah, talking about the sort of rejection, I was on a round table, or in a room with a discussion with screenwriter Scott Frank, who did like Godless and Queen's Gambit, and you know, countless incredible films. He did Logan, and so he's a sort of writer director. And someone asked him this kind of question, and he was like, "Oh yeah, like Netflix like rejected this other thing or something." You know, it's like, and I was just like, Scott Frank gets rejections. I was just like, whoa. Yeah, so I think it doesn't, yeah, it's really important to sort of detach the sort of what a halo you put around whoever it may be that you admire, because yeah, they all get told no, or that is nonsense, go away. Now and again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think like something that I want to touch on just very quickly is like, yeah, what Sullivan sort of said. Like, I mean, there's only so much time on this earth that we have, kind of, you know, staring in the distance. And, you know, like there's a lot there, and I guess like there are artists out there, or like, you know, I don't know, like looking at like manga artists who kind of like, yeah, they kind of collapse in their 40s or like 50s from overwork, and, you know, they kind of, it's kind of crazy. Like it, you know, you kind of need to take care of yourself and be able to, I don't know. I mean, it is insane no more. Like you don't need to, you don't need work or capitalism to self-actualize, and that's what I'm gonna bring. What I'm gonna say here as well.
I'm sorry, I just realized my entire posture got like really excited and engaged as soon as I started to talk about the reality of death. So that probably says a lot about me, and I apologize.
A really nice question is, what are some of the personal joys you get from writing for indie games that might not be so readily apparent?
I think
yeah.
I think the community, the indie game dev community is just amazing. The one I know the best is the UK indie dev scene. Is just like, the people are so cool. There's so many, and really super supportive, and yeah, it's one of the hardest things about the situation we're in is, like, I'm usually bumping into Freya and Oliver like all the time at events and cool stuff, and just hanging out and talking nonsense, and yeah, swapping tales on cool games we've seen at whatever event. And yeah, the amount of support I've had from the indie game dev community is, you know, that's part of the reason that Claire and I were able to finish this game, was just incredible, incredible support. Have I just killed?
Yeah, you pretty much said my answer, so I'm now trying to think, like, God, I need to come up with something else to say.
One thing I really like about indie, especially to get into the community bit that Shell has mentioned, is because indie engagements also tend to be shorter, you get the opportunity to work with more people in a much more limited span of time. So you don't have to have the experience of, like, moving sometimes across an ocean to a studio and then going, oh God, this was a mistake. This is a lot. You get to, it feels like you're training in a hyperbolic time chamber. You're rapidly learning new things. You're experiencing a bunch of different work environments and production realities and problem solving scenarios with a lot of different people. You get to just see who you really mesh with, who you really don't, who you can be great friends with, but in terms of collaboration, you likely shouldn't. The great thing about, one of the greatest things about indie, in terms of, we talk about freedom, but I think part of the freedom that isn't discussed is the freedom to have commitments that do not decide your fate. If I, as an American, try to get a full-time job at an in-house in a studio in America, we live in a country without nationalized healthcare. So there's a lot of decisions which I am making specifically with that in the back of my head. And I know people who have been at AAA studios for years just because of that one point. And the ability to have, like, non-make or break, be like, I'm going to make a game with over a month with someone, or I'm going to try doing this really weird writing challenge. I don't know if I'll be good for it, but I got the job, so I might as well give it a shot. The ability to have more experiences, more of a varied life, without destroying your overall framework for living, is so important and so fantastic in indie. And so it is one thing that I would call out, not just as a strength of that, of being here, but also something that is, I'm trying to find some way of expressing, like, it's an incredible advantage, and we should embrace this idea of having more things in our lives in general that aren't make or break, that will not decide our fate if they succeed, fail, things that just teach us as a matter of going through them.
I'm going to follow two heavy, poignant, long answers with one short and less deep and meaningful one, which is, I think indie games, the audience, there is a greater proportion of the audience which is other indie game devs. And so sometimes there's a fun feeling of, like, long distance table tennis with the games that you make, which you get because they're shorter scale, they're more frequent, and there's that kind of, I guess, going on the same community thing, like there's like community. And so it's like, you know, I've made this one, someone else a few months later has made another one, like not like a response to it, but there's that sort of like dialogue almost, which I really like.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would really say is like actually like I kind of want to mix Zalavier and Charles' answer for a tiny bit, where like it's something that, you know, obviously we're missing right now because of vaguely gestures outside. Is like these events are kind of happening online, and it's these sort of indie events are really, really valuable, I think, for someone who's kind of new, or I mean, like even if people have been there for a very long time, going to like, I don't know, a maze in Berlin, or going to see these festivals and going to see these games, and especially seeing something that is a work in progress is so valuable to understanding like how, like, you know, like kind of your own work, comparing it to your own work, and then being able to see like not just like, you know, like the one finished game, or but getting a glimpse of like 100 work in progress kind of things, and seeing the breadth of what this industry could be is really, really fun. Like I loved going to events. Ended up I think in 1 year I actually did end up going to like 32 events more than once a month, which is probably a little bit insane. Just because like, yeah, like, and it was absolutely fascinating to just sort of like go through all of the different little spaces and just seeing like, oh, what are you guys making? And then kind of going through that decision of like, why is this interesting, or why is this not interesting? Would I want to make something like this? Kind of assessing your like your skill level and your taste, like with just like everyone. So like really, really quickly, I think is a very, really nice way of like kind of getting that sense of like, you know, like, oh, you know, like what would I make different, or like what are different, and it just kind of is a lot of fun, and I think really trains you to kind of like be being able to also make decisions that maybe like otherwise, yeah, you wouldn't be able to, or like you kind of forget. Andy's there.
It's a table tennis.
Andy
frame,
has
actually.
appeared.
I was literally just the voice from above the darkness. But we have got about 5 minutes left because we need to wrap up bang on time, and I'm going to do a bit of wrapping up. So we can take one question or a couple of very quick fire questions. But we got 5 minutes, and I shall disappear again now.
Ooh, I like a ghost.
I'm up for a speed round.
Speed round.
Yeah, speed round.
All right, let's go with this. How, I mean, like this is a tough, like, how much of an overlap is there between a writer and a game designer? Is it realistic to pursue a role which is a combination of the two? I mean, there is narrative design, but who wants to go over the fact that both writers, narrative design, and game design, basically, we don't have a proper answer for what those mean.
I mean, like, I've gone from a solo dev to then a freelance writer, and now I am a game designer. So there is a fluidity moving between the roles, and there is, like, they're not exactly the same, but there's definitely skill overlap, and you probably end up learning bits of each as you go.
Every game writer I know has definitely been hired as a writer and been used as like a game designer or a level designer or something else at some point, like totally outside of the job description, because the job descriptions don't make sense.
Yeah, depends where you go. And yeah, every time you move to a different client, if you're freelance or company, it'll be slightly different. So yes, I think it's the quick fire answer.
What kind of failures have you had as a game writer? What have you learned from them? I think that like this is an interesting one, and like maybe like it's a hard one to kind of answer quickly. But I think definitely like I don't know, like getting a job, or like that I've spent like 3 years like freelancing, and like it's definitely like being like, what's the word? It's a lot of the work is like you do have to go and find it. You know, simple as that. Like it is like it's a hustle, like when you're freelancing, and like a lot of things are sometimes also it's just like from the circumstances. I think like most of the time everyone's kind of like doing what they can do best, and it's just sometimes from like the miscommunication that you have with other people or these kind of things. Yeah, like that's where you get like failures or anything like that. But I think like sometimes I don't know, like I've had experiences with bad bosses, and it kind of soured my experience with the game. And definitely like it was at the point, it was kind of at the moment where it's like a few of the developers we were kind of like, okay, this is like critical. We're just like trying to make sure we're just trying to ship the game as fast as we can so that the director could not mess with it anymore. Like that was kind of like the mode that we're on. And like, yeah, like I think it's a lot of it is just finding the right people to work with, I suppose, at least from my end. Like that's
also what is a failure? Depends what you define.
Is it a failure or is it a learning opportunity?
Exactly.
I think one big failure that I've had is, or at least anytime that I look back at something as a failure, because I do see most things as a learning opportunity, as Freya said, arising in full strength, constantly at full power at all times. You're great. The big thing that stands out for me is being too attached to a number of different things, being so attached to a project that I couldn't see when things were going bad, being so attached to a specific narrative approach when something when a different solution could have been taken, being so attached to seeing a game be good that I didn't recognize that, like, in most cases in games, it isn't just on one person for that game to be good. It all has to come together. Sometimes you will ship something that's a 7 out of 10, a 5 out of 10, and that's just life. And it could very well not be your fault, or you'll see a version of a game that you loved, a version of it, just die, and something else be put in. And now it's a 25-year-old protagonist again, and the entire thing's disjointed, and it doesn't make sense. Like, the more I'm very committed to finishing things and making projects happen and being as positive a collaborator as I can be. And actually, the less I hyperfixate today on projects, on problems, on specific way that things have to happen, and look at how I can enable the people around me to do their best work and how I can enable myself to do my best work in the most healthy manner possible, the happier I am. Like, yeah, this game is going to be a 7 out of 10. When can we ship it and make the next thing?
Honestly, all my favorite games are 7 out of 10s. I'm personally, I think 7 out of 10 is a 10 out of 10, and 10 out of 10 I don't trust to be a 10 out of 10. That's my like. That's
Life
my
is too short
rating model.
to play 10 out of 10 games.
Yeah, a 7 out of 10. You know they tried something, whether it worked or not.
Everyone dies.
Everyone dies.
What a wonderful ending.
Yeah.
That is. So if you take nothing else away from this, everybody dies. Always aim for 7 out of 10.
Use a fountain pen.
And bury yourself in
official advice from the Writers Guild.
Right, exactly. Can I just say before you close us off that like the energy on Twitter from everybody who's been watching is amazing, and I am so here for it. Love it. Like, yeah, really engaged audience. It's been cool.
So while everyone's still here, quick chance, should you wish, no pressure, to do a little bit of self-promotion for us quickly. Twitter tags, the addresses where people can go to buy your wonderful indie works, to then they can give it 7 out of 10 on Steam. No, give it 10 out of 10 on Steam. So they can give it 10 out of 10 on Steam to balance out the others like that. Please, a quick roundup of how people can find you and your wonderful work.
Okay, so I'll go first. You can find me at Brendan Gibbons. Say No More is the last game I just came out. It got a Steam review that said cheaper than therapy. So I'm going to take that as like, that'll do. Zanavir, where can people find you?
Oh, hello. I'm at WRET Nelson on Twitter. I talk about mortality and also the joy of life and creativity. Today I posted a meteor made of flesh. Follow me. An airport for aliens currently run by dogs comes out in less than a month. Buy it.
Shella, where can we find you?
I'm at Shella Ramanan, and there's at Threefold Games as well. And I mostly live tweet films that I watch. People seem to enjoy that.
They're very good live tweets. I've watched a bunch of films thanks to those.
And Freya, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at SPDRCSTL. I post mostly pictures of the countryside at the moment because I'm busy with my day job. I am working on a truck sim / visual novel, which will be coming out in a few months. Go buy it when it does. And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll know when it does come out.
Oh, I forgot to say, before I forget, it comes out on Switch and Xbox on Thursday, and I'm so excited.
So it's always, I don't know, I was always like, when you like, I have a game on Switch, I'm like, yes, I am the uncle who works for the Nintendo.
Great stuff, thank you. I knew you were coming to the end of the panel because my daughter has started running around being a dinosaur and making loud noises. So if anything happens right now. So that is the end of our wonderful panel. You can find the Writers Guild at the Writers Guild on Twitter, myself at English Scribe. So I'd just like to do a quick round of thank yous. So I'd like to thank the Writers Guild for hosting us. I'd like to thank Artsy for sponsoring the events. And of course, said you can come along to their event at 7:30 on Thursday following the panel then. I'd like to thank all of you for coming along and for your wonderful questions. I'm sure we didn't get to them all because there were so many of them. Some of them have been answered in some of the other panels that we've had on, or will be on the other panels coming this week. So please do take your chance to book to come along to those. And of course, thank you to our wonderful panelists. I mean, I knew you were all amazing, insightful, and wonderful people before tonight, and I'm going away sort of absolutely mind blown having to process all of that. So thank you very, very much for taking your time and for sharing so much with us tonight. So on that note, can I just ask everybody, we can't hear you or see you, but we will feel it through the universe. If you can just give a round of applause and another fanfare for our panelists, they will feel it through the universe, even if they can't hear it. But thank you very much to everyone for their time coming along today and for being part of the community. Stay creative.